Peter, don't. They say if you watch that video, you die.
Ah, that's a lot of baloney.
いつもお菓子だけ音部ロックな魂軽音部ハッピーになりたいならば軽音部ニコニコしちゃう
As some of you may know, K-On! Has not only become my favorite anime, but my favorite show of all time. Never would I have imagined a series about high schoolers in a music club who procrastinate on practicing all the time would have such a huge impact on me. Although it's a bit overlooked when it comes to anime in general and is seen by the general public as generic slice of life about cute girls doing cute things, I think K-On! Excels at subtle character development between its main cast. Every fan of K-On! Has a favorite character for many different reasons. Perhaps for being incredibly relatable, being someone who brings a lot of laughs, or for just purely fucking existing. My favorite character in K-On! Happens to be the main protagonist herself, Yui Hirasawa, who I think is the best example of how the show handles character development, and no episode shows this better than Season 2, Episode 9, Finals. The episode begins with Yui getting out of the house going for a jog. She runs into her elderly neighbor Tomi Ichimonji, who I'm gonna call Granny for the rest of the video, in which they greet each other and Yui declares she's going to give everything 110%. This line already shows how much Yui has grown throughout the show. For those who haven't seen K-On!, Yui was presented as an airhead, very absent-minded, clumsy, and very lazy. Her laziness was due to not really having anything of her own to do for most of her life. Like, nothing to put her mind on, pretty much.
You know, looking back on it, for as long as I've known you, you've never joined a single club, have you?
I really do feel like I ought to at least try to do something, but what the heck should I be doing?
Thankfully, ever since joining the Light Music Club, Yui has found a place where she can take interest in music and socialize with people who, despite her flaws, hold her close to them. It just comes to Yui now having a drive to at least somewhat work hard, basically. Also, I like this subtle detail with her running and nearly tripping before recovering quickly, which could be a callback to the first episode where she tries to rush out of the house to get to school, but trips and falls due to her clumsiness. It shows despite still being flawed as a person, she's trying to work against said flaws. That is proven as she gets to school late due to jogging for too long and falls asleep during class, pretty much putting effort into the wrong thing. Later, the group hit the books to study for their final exams, but Yui once again gets distracted looking at her friends' notebooks, and they all play crossword puzzles instead of being productive. Even Mio gets distracted, who's usually the most mature and level-headed of the group, and the one who kept Yui on track in episode 3 of season 1, Cramp Session. Side note, a lot of people like to make jokes like Yui being mentally challenged or retarded, when really her traits of being absent-minded and having a lack of focus are more akin to ADHD, at least to me.
We got some dumbass motherfuckers floating around this country.
After school, Yui once again runs into Granny, and the latter comments on how attached Yui has become to her guitar since she joined the club, and is proud of her for getting into it. Again, proving my point on how the club has affected Yui for the better. We find out through Yui's thoughts that Granny used to look after her and her sister when they were younger, and Yui notes how much Granny's done for her and wants to somehow return the favor. This one line shows how much more considerate Yui has become since episode 2 of season 1, Instruments, where she simply learns to be less selfish and give more than take, as throughout that episode her friends were working hard to help her afford the guitar she currently owns now, and seeing how much they were helping her, she decided to let them spend their own earned money. Even though Mugi later has the store employee lower the price since she's the daughter's president, but I wrote daughter's president in the script. What? Even though Mugi later has the store employee lower the price since she's the president's daughter, but it's a thought that counts, you know? After eating dinner with Ui, Yui, on her own free will, buckles down and studies for her finals and does the same the next day during free period. In Cram Session, she couldn't sit down and study without Mio, Mugi, and Ritsu. Mio and Mugi keeping her on track. But taking what she learned, Yui applies herself. Stop looking at that butterfly, you! While Yui's studying, she hears from Ui that they're out of soy sauce, and Yui volunteers to go buy some for her. Although she probably did this just to get away from studying, I must note that doing this for Ui is not something she would have done earlier in the series. Despite Ui being the younger sister, because of their parents always traveling around the world, stupid fathers having careers, she's usually the one who steps up to take care of the two, while Yui just sits around carefree. The two still get along extremely well and have a loving relationship regardless, best shown in the Christmas episode in season 1. And Ui doesn't seem to be bothered by this, but it's clear one has done more than the other. This action from Yui is a step up for her as a person, but it's not her big sister moment quite yet. That's for later in season 2 in the episode No Club Room, where Ui gets sick and Yui has to step up and take care of her for once. So you could see this as kind of a foreshadow, and I'm happy this moment exists. It's either that or maybe I'm just overanalyzing it, I don't know. Yui runs to get soy sauce while singing a song to remember what she's getting until she runs into Granny again, who asks what she's up to to, and Yui responds saying she and her sister have ran out of sugar.
Mission failed. We'll get 'em next time.
After Granny gives Yui some sugar, she tells her about a talent show that happens every year and wonders if Yui would like to compete since there aren't a lot of contestants this year. And if she wins, she could take a trip to the hot springs with Ui. However, it turns out the talent show is the day after Yui's finals, but despite this, she agrees to compete by playing her guitar. Despite Yui's good intentions, which were set up earlier, she's kind of put herself in a troubling situation where she has to study for a final exam, which she could easily fail due to her airheadedness, and practice for the talent show to help Granny at the same time. You'd think this would be a recipe for disaster, right? Well, even though Ui reminds her that juggling these two things won't be easy, Yui doesn't care and declares she'll live up to the task. Also, she uses the same hand gesture she used in the first episode, and I love it. The following day, Yui tells her friends about the talent show, and despite Mio asking if she'll be fine on her own, Yui thinks she'll handle it just fine, which is a direct contrast to Cram Session where she desperately asks for Mio's help studying for an exam.
And that's why I need you to help me, Mio!
You mean that you didn't do any studying at all?
I just couldn't do it!
Also, Yui makes this comparison of Granny and Ritsu.
You know, now that I think about it, she sort of reminds me of you, Ri-chan. Reminds you how?
I don't even have a joke for that. What the fuck, Yui? Azusa finds out from Ui that Yui's competing in the talent show, to which she thinks that must mean Yui's in over her head. And this reaction makes complete sense for her character. To give a little background on Azusa, she's another light music club member, albeit the youngest of the group. She joined the group in the middle of season 1 because of their performance in the school concert, but later finds out that the club just sit around, drink tea, and don't practice a lot, much to Azusa's dismay. And despite quickly growing an appreciation for their close bond as friends, she sees Yui as the biggest example of procrastinating. Though throughout season 1, they do grow closer, and Azusa sees more sides to Yui, such as in yet another summer camp. That is the title, I'm serious. When she sees Yui buckle down to practice on her own at night, even though she was goofing off for most of the day and thus practices with her. And in the season 1 finale Light Music, when Yui gets sick right before the school festival and goes as far to suggest canceling their performance since doing it without Yui would mean nothing, showing her loyalty. They continue to grow closer in season 2, and I think this episode is their big turning point in their friendship. Later in the evening, Azusa's running errands until she sees Yui practicing her guitar at the riverbank and stops to talk to her. Yui explains she's playing in the talent show alone because she doesn't want to distract the others from the finals and is going to juggle both and give it 110%. I think this is the moment where Yui gains Azusa's full respect. We see the latter stare off into the distance for a second, most likely taking back what she said about Yui being in over her head, and tells her she understands and wants to enter the talent show with her. Throughout the next few minutes of the episode, Azusa helps Yui study for the finals. She plans out a schedule for her and just overall keeps her on track. One thing I'd say I don't like about the episode, and it doesn't really have to do with the episode itself, is the slight changes the dub makes. Now, I must note that the dub for the series overall is pretty solid. The cast choices fit their characters and they give a good performance.
Ri-chan, I see that you too fell asleep during class, my soul sister.
However, you know the 110% line Yui keeps repeating throughout the episode? The dub weirdly changes it to Yui simply saying she's gonna work hard. I know I'm nitpicking, but the only reason I'm bringing this up is in a later episode, Romeo and Juliet, Azusa repeats the line the night before their school festival,
明日か。頑張ろう。
which could solidify how much closer her and Yui have become. Hell, in the dub, Azusa doesn't even say let's work hard like Yui does in the dub of Finals. Instead, she says,
Let's give it all we've got.
I feel like this change sort of ruins that callback just a little bit, but the visual element is still there. I don't know. Also, the timing of this joke is off in the dub as well.
あずにゃん、おやつの時間はありません。あずにゃん、what about snack time?
There isn't any.
Later, back at the riverbank, we get what might be my favorite scene in the episode. As Yui and Azusa practice for the talent show, trying out different types of music to appeal to the elderly audience, such as anka and folk music. It's here we see Yui's skill in both compared to Azusa, who's not used to doing this kind of music. It makes sense why Yui would know anka considering the genre was introduced pre-World War II, and modern anka, being more akin to traditional Japanese music, was introduced post-World War II, and she might have learned about it from Granny. Plus, I like that the episode and series as a whole shows that there are some things Yui is more skilled at than Azusa, despite not being as hardworking. Azusa in general is a better guitar player, but isn't able to sing and play at the same time, while Yui can and also has perfect pitch, which means she doesn't need a tuner.
I do it by ear. See?
And in this episode, Azusa's keeping her on track for the finals, while Yui's the one taking charge in what their performance in the talent show is going to be like in her own quirky way. The two think they should do a folk version of Fwafwa Time and think of a stage name, that being Yui Azu, And then the next day, it's time for the final exams. But the Light Music Club's advisor, Sawako, is complaining.
I'm having big time tea and sweets withdrawal. Why haven't we been having any tea and cake parties lately? What's more important to you people, that rule or me?
Shut the fuck up!
Everyone takes their final exam, and due to the hard work Yui's been putting in for the past few days, she falls asleep. But don't worry, childhood friend Notika's here to save her grades.
Ma'am? I dropped my eraser. May I please pick it up? Go ahead.
You know what? Fuck Harui. Notika's the god we need. Later, Yui and Azusa are waiting for their turn in the talent show. Yui falls asleep on Azusa's shoulder, and knowing how much she's done in the past few days, Azusa lets her sleep for a bit. The two play a special version of Food Pen Ball Pen from the season 1 finale, and after the show ends, it turns out the two only got a participation prize, which saddens Yui since she was planning to give the trip as a present to Granny instead of what the latter suggested. With all of that, however, Granny reassures her it's the thought that counts and acknowledges how much she's grown since she was little. It's a simple and sweet moment, but at the same time, it kind of strikes a chord with me as someone whose grandmother took care of them their whole life, and while isn't the most qualified or patient, does their best to do the same for them as well. Plus, it really shows how much more considerate Yui has become compared to her earlier in the show, who was willing to let everyone do everything for her. Days later, Yui gets high marks on her finals, and even though she says she got lucky guessing questions correctly, Mio notes how hard Yui studied. With that, the episode ends on this note.
You know, I wanted to play in the talent show too. Ooh, we can play as Yui Mugi next time. How's Ritsumiyo sound?
Or Yui Mugi Mio Azu.
Hey!
God damn, the way these people poke fun at each other reminds me of the classic Thomas episodes for some weird reason.
You don't know what I suffer, moaned Henry. Rubbish, said Thomas. You're too fat, you need exercise.
Before I even had the idea of making this video, I knew Finals was my favorite episode of K-On!, but I didn't exactly know why. However, after a bit of thinking, it finally started to click. What I adore about K-On! Is its take on a coming-of-age story. In my opinion, a character doesn't necessarily have to become a completely different person over time, but can also remain the same person while noticing the things they need to work on. That's why Yui is my favorite character of the series, cause she embodies exactly that, and it's seen throughout this episode. The girl constantly makes mistakes, even messing up on simple tasks like getting soy sauce but mixing it up with sugar, and arriving late to school because she got distracted with jogging. All of that is true, but Yui shows that those important moments beforehand have stuck with her and is using that to her advantage despite her drawbacks. The lessons these characters learn do matter and aren't forgotten. All of what Yui learned comes into play here. She's more hardworking, independent, and giving than she was before. K-On! Is brilliant at making you relate to these characters and enjoy watching them grow into more realized people. And I think Finals is K-On! At its absolute best.